In this episode, I want to talk about VMS, Ultrix and other documentation from Digital Equipment Corporation and the various documentation in my collection. Hello viewers, welcome back to another episode. And this episode is about a very special topic. It's about documentation from DEC. And this is a topic I'm really interested in. And because the YouTube algorithm is still confused, I do not have to care about clicking or viewing rate. So my last videos have a low number of views, therefore I can make that video about that topic I'm really interested in, because I'm interested in collecting documentation. And as you can see here, my shelf, you've also seen it before the intro. I own various documentation from DEC. This is mostly VMS documentation, but also from Ultrix, from Pathworks, for hardware and for accessories. So this is various kind of documentation, and I've got also some kind of marketing information catalogs, also about earlier VAX machines and also about PDP. Some of these parts are in German and not in English, so it's a lot of stuff. Not everything is in my shelf, so the marketing stuff is in different folders somewhere else. And I'm still looking for DEC documentation. So I have the documentation for 3 versions of VMS, and I'm looking for other VMS documentation, but I'm also looking for documentation for R611 or RT11 or other PDP documentation. I do not own any PDP. I've only own a power supply for PDP, but not a PDP, but I'm interested in PDP documentation as well. And in this video I will start with the VMS documentation. You can see here there is a color scheme. The oldest one is this one I have. This is documentation for VMS version 3. It's called VAX VMS at that time. It's from 1982 and it contains 11 volumes. It ends here. And the volume 2, 4, 5 and 6 has volume A and B. So in total these are 9 plus 6, so 15 folders. The previous generation of documentation, I think it was in blue folders. So I saw pictures with blue folders from digital. I think version 1 and 2 were in blue folders, and then they changed to this cool 80s-like orange manuals. Here on the right, these 3 manuals, these are documentation for VAX VMS version 4. I do not have the whole set, only volume 5B, 6 and 7B. This is from 1984 to 1986, but I do not know how big the whole set is, because I do not have the master index and I do not have the rest of this documentation, so I cannot say something about the version 4 documentation. And then they changed to version 5, and version 5 is this big gray thing. It starts over here and goes to ends here. And I will talk about later about the VMS 5 documentation. It's from 1988 to 1990. The name changed from VAX VMS to VMS, but this is, I think, the most interesting and biggest documentation set I've owned, so I will talk about later in detail about the VMS 5 documentation. And then they changed to white, and I do not have VMS 6 documentation, only this one book. This is white, and they didn't use folders anymore, so these are standard books. And then they changed to this one. This is OpenVMS 7. It's also white here on the back, but they have this colored kind of front for the documentation, and you can see from the space, the VMS 7 documentation needs only, there's about 80 centimeters in this shelf from a well-known Swedish furnish seller, and the VMS 5 documentation takes about 1, 2, 3, 4.5 times 80 centimeters from space. I'm using normally these modern OpenVMS 7 documentation when I have to look up something because it's up to date, and there's also really good cluster documentation, and because I want to learn more about VMS clustering, I've read there's a cluster system manual, but also a guide for cluster configuration. And I've also got some other cluster documentation now. There is a really good book from Davis. It's called VAX Cluster Principles. It's from 1993. And I've got also something from DEC Educational Service, or I don't know what's really called. It's called VAX Cluster System Management Student Workbook, where I can learn also stuff about VMS clustering, but I do only have a PDF, not the original book. Also the Davis book, I have a PDF of that book, not the original book, because it's quite hard to get this book, the physical copy of that book. Let's have a deeper look on the VMS 5 documentation, and you can see here the lower part of the VMS 5 documentation, because the VMS 5 documentation contains different folders, and you can see here books. This is the smaller version of the VMS 5 documentation. It contains of 5 books. One is this is the user manual, system management manual. This is the new feature manual. This is version 5.2 and 5.3. This is the reason why it's 6 books here. The license management utility. I've got 12 of them. And then is here on the left. You can see it. It's very small. This is the overview of the VMS documentation. So there is a manual about the manuals. And this is a really interesting document because it says something about the documentation sets. And this small documentation set containing of this overview document and 4 of these books is called the base documentation set. We can have a look here. I think, yeah. The base documentation set contains that. And the bigger one, the bigger set here on the top, this is called the extended documentation set. And the extended documentation set contains several interesting parts I will show you later, because there are categories and different manuals. But I think it's really cool to have a manual about manuals, and you can see what's contains the base documentation set contains that, and this is the extended set, which has also optional manuals, and I have the full set, so I have everything what is possible about it. So this is the reason why I really like this VMS 5 documentation. And let's have a look at the extended set and at the different folders. So now I'm at the top of my, it's called gray wall, and these are the first manuals, and the first manual is general user. So you can see here this is general user. So and here's an U, hope you can see that. And this is the master index, and there were 3 main parts. The first part is general user. It ends over here with volume 6b, and then the next part is system management. It has this small m, and it's ends here, and the last part is programming with a p. And you can, this is for different kind of users. So general user is for users, M for system managers, and the P part is used when you program software for VMS. And you can see here is this color bar. The programming manuals were stored in boxes for 20 years, and the M and U part were used stand in a shelf, and the sun bleached out the bar a bit, is the reason why it's brighter than the programming manuals. Yeah, and it contains different things. In general, you have in each volume a manual at the beginning where it's explained the topic of the manual, and after that there's a reference for each command in detail. This is the reason why this set is so big, because you have a reference for each command and for each part of each command, so everything is explained in that manuals. Generally, my interest ends here because I do not program for VMS at the moment. Maybe we'll do that later, but here it starts, and it's not the documentation of the programming language. No, it's the documentation of all the interfaces and all that stuff. So the programming language is not documented here. The interesting part of the volume P is in this overview manual, the P part ends with volume 9, and I've got a volume 10. This is think is VAX TPU is the text processing unit. So there's also a reference for text processing unit, which is not described in the manual, which describes the manuals. So my P part is bigger than it's the description of 1989, I think it's from release. So, and here after the P part, there are manuals without any character here. These are the optional parts, and one is the obsolete features manual. I've never looked in that, but I think from the name you can see the obsolete features in it. But I do not use older versions of VMS. I still do not use VMS 5. I'm using VMS 6. So, but here you can documentation of the features. Then here are the release notes, 2 volumes because it's so big it does not fit in 1 volume. And these are the software product descriptions. There's a separate folder for that. And here this smaller folder is about the volume shadowing, and it's quite confusing because here is written volume shadowing, but the first one is the first version and the second one is the second version of volume shadowing, but the DEC did not write it on the cover. I don't know why they didn't, because it's confusing, but when you have a look in the manual, you can see the different versions, and this is I think this is also part of, not an official part of VMS 5 documentation, but as I've stored here, is the manual of DEC Windows. And also here on the right is smaller manual about SCSI device support manual, but these are really obsolete parts. Yeah, this is I think in my opinion, the quite interesting VMS 5 documentation. The next part of my collection is the documentation of Ultrix. So this is the end of the VMS part, and let's switch to Unix, and I've got also a documentation set of Ultrix 32. I do not know if that documentation set is complete. So it's incomplete, you can see it later, but some volumes are missing, but I think it was complete when I saw it the last time. So maybe somewhere is a box where some folders are stored. But I do not know the whole size because the master index is confusing, and I do not know the order how to order the manuals in a shelf. So this is the general information. It's only volume 1, so I don't know. Exists a volume 2? I do not know. And then it's a reference for Ultrix 32, 5 volumes, and system management 3 volumes, and software development. And these are also 3 volumes. And after that, the documentation of Ultrix Workstation software starts. So this is Worksystem User, Volume 1, 2. And then it's Programming, Volume 5. And that's the reason I think there wasn't such a gap in the order. So I think the volumes before 5 are stored somewhere, but this is Programming. And also here, the next volume, XUI Software Development, do not have Volume 1. So I think these volumes are somewhere stored. I have to look at the place where all my manuals were stored before. It goes to Volume 5. And after that, Volume 6 and Volume 7 is bigger, I don't know really why. And after that, the TCP/IP printing server host for Ultrix. The folders with this gap here in the middle, you can stand on the desk. That's the reason why you can flip that around, and then it stands better for reading the manuals. And down here, this is VMS Ultrix connection. So you can connect, I think you can connect Ultrix in VMS. I never used Ultrix, so when I am able to install Ultrix on a machine, so when I have a machine where I can install Ultrix on, and I'm still looking for a Workstation 3100, then I will have a look into that. And here on the right, 3 manuals for Ultrix SQL. I think this is some kind of database for Ultrix. I have a tape from Ultrix SQL, so I can install it when I have a machine where Ultrix is installed. But I think it's also the release notes and integration with Windows NT. So I have a lot of Ultrix stuff which I never used before, but maybe I will have the opportunity to test all that stuff in the future. So this is my Pathworks documentation, Pathworks for DOS version 4.1. I haven't made a video about Pathworks yet because I have to read more about Pathworks, but Pathworks is software where you can connect from DOS or from Windows to VMS hosts, to VAX hosts, and that's the reason why I still won't go deeper into Pathworks. But I never used Pathworks before, so it's a quite interesting topic, and also for the older Pathworks versions, maybe I need an older computer like 286 or 386, and I do not have such an old PC here. There's also a version for Mac, and I've owned an older Mac, so maybe I will show you that Pathworks software on Mac someday. But let's have a look at the documentation. There are these 3 boxes. The first box is empty, it's only a software product description in it. I do not know which manual was in which box originally, but I think the manuals are complete, because when we open the other boxes, most of the manuals are still covered in foil, and only 3 manuals are where the foil is removed, so they are still in its original state. And also the folder here, the box here on the right, all manuals are still in the foil, so they are unread at the moment. So the interesting documentation are the 3 ones which are open, and so I can read more about Pathworks and go deeper into Pathworks, and maybe I can show you more about Pathworks in future episodes. Yeah, and this is my collection of hardware documentation here in the lowest part of my shelf, and most of the hardware I do not own. So this is the documentation for VAX 8200 or 8300. I do not own this machine, I do not own a VT220, and I do not own an LA 210 printer. I have a printer from Digital, but it's another one. I do not know the model because it's still in the box, and later on I will connect the printer to my cluster, but at the moment I really do not know which kind of dot matrix printer it is. And this is a manual for Workstation 2. I do not have a Workstation 2. This is a manual for a BA42 storage device that I have such a device. And this is the manual for my VAX 4300. Interestingly, this manual is in German. This is the installation manual and the user's manual. And I've got also a copy in French, which is still in its foil, so it's unused at the moment, and I do not have these manuals in English. That's also not the original folder. I used that folder because it was a spare folder. That's the reason why it's an orange folder. And here, this is a manual for a Workstation 3176 I do not have. I do not have a DEC server 250, and I do not have a Workstation 3100. And here on the left are several manuals for VT 320, which I do not have. And well, on the left edge of that shelf is the Networks BIOS guide from Digital. I showed that manual in my networks video. One of these manuals is a manual for VT420. That is some kind of hardware I have, but the rest is interesting documentation. I do also have a folder with other manuals. They are a bit bigger, like the bigger folders, also for some kind of VAX 6000 and other stuff I do not have. And so with the time I got several different manuals of several different hardware, and so maybe when I get that hardware, I do not what the future brings to me, I have the manuals for that hardware. So that's the end of the video, of the tour of my collection, and I hope you find that interesting, and leave comments below, and see you the next time.